Hi there, welcome back to iStill University Online, and today I think we've got an interesting topic for you. I want to discuss barrel aging. Barrel aging is important for most products, for whiskey, for rum, for brandy even. And there's a lot of myths out there, so today I want to talk about what barrel aging really does for you and how you can manage it in such a way that it helps make the product, the spirits, the whiskey, the rum, the brandy that you want to bring to the market. So I want to educate you, I want to share information and teach you what you need to look at when you look at barrels. Now, why are barrels important? If you read the text, and if you go back, like do a Google search, go back 10, 15, 20 years, what you'll read is that people say, whiskey makers, bourbon makers, they'll say and they'll talk in an interview and say like, barrel aging, wood management is amazingly important. 50–55% of the flavors of our whiskey, of our bourbon, of our rum actually come from the wood, come from the barrel, so it's really important. And then if you scroll forward a little bit, if you actually go to, let's say, interviews done with big whiskey houses and they talk about barrel aging, all of a sudden they say like, you know what, barrel aging and wood management has become even more important than it used to be. 85% of our flavors come from the barrel. And you might think like, wow, that's really important, right? So the barrel has become more important over a period of just 10, 15 years. But I need you to listen carefully to what they say. They didn't say that the total flavor inside their whiskey was going up. They basically said if we say our whiskey is like 100% of the flavors that it is, in the past it used to be 50% wood flavors, and now it's basically 85% wood flavors. So what they've done is they haven't augmented their barrel management or their wood management. Wood flavors stay the same. Barreling times stay the same. What they actually did is start to produce their whiskey more and more efficiently on bigger continuous columns. The product, the new make spirit that comes out has less flavor. So relatively, the barrel becomes more important. You have an option here. I think barrel aging is important for a whiskey, a rum, and even in brandy, but I think it should always only add to your new make, add to your whiskey, instead of completely overpower it. You as a craft distiller can batch distill. That means you can cut for heads, hearts, and tails. You can create a three-dimensional product that stands up to the wood. And it gives you an opportunity to make a better flavored whiskey, rum, or brandy than the big boys can. Today I want to talk about how that works and what you need to do in order to get there. If we look at what happens inside the barrel, it's basically three processes taking place. First one is oxidation. Second one is recombination. And the third one is actually the flavors of the wood, like tea almost, leaching into your new make spirit, leaching into your rum or your whiskey. Wood flavors. So if people think that barrel aging is all about the wood and the color and the stuff, the flavors that actually get extracted from the wood, you'd be wrong. Because the distillate in itself, the new make spirit, actually has a lot of front end and back end flavor that needs to balance out, that needs to become more complex, more enjoyable, more drinkable. And the way that happens is through oxidation and recombination. If we do a distillation run, we cut for heads, hearts, and tails. There will always be a little bit of heads in your new make spirit. There will always be a little bit of tails in your new make spirit, and there probably should be, because it makes your drink interesting, it makes it multi-dimensional. There's a general rule of thumb. What we see is that the headsy smearing that goes into your barrel needs oxidation. It needs the introduction of oxygen in order to mellow out. So, rough head cut, you actually solve by introducing oxygen. And if there's a lot of tails in your product, you need to barrel age it for a long time. You need to age it for a long time because those headsy molecules oxidize, but the tailsy molecules actually recombine. They meet and mingle and every now and then in such a way that they create a new compound. Usually better in flavor, less harsh. So what we do in a barrel is not just extracting wood flavors. What we do is we allow the drink to actually oxidize. And in a barrel this goes very well because a barrel is a breathing, almost living thing. So part of the spirit evaporates out of the barrel. So over the years you see the level of liquids inside the barrel drop, usually by around 3–3.5% per year. As the liquid level drops, more and more oxygen molecules get introduced into the layer of air on top of your drink, inside the barrel. So if you lose some in barrel aging, please know that as a result you introduce more oxygen, your headsy factions actually mellow out nicely. If you leave it in the barrel longer, or if you leave it in the barrel at higher temperatures, maybe you're in a hot climate. We've got a customer in Texas that it's like 35–40 degrees in summer. You can imagine that recombination goes a lot quicker at those temperatures. The longer you leave it in the barrel, the more reactions take place, the more interesting the whiskey or rum will become. Is there an optimum level? Not on recombination. It stops at a certain moment and you've reached your full potential. On oxidation there is, and the problem with oxidation is that oxidation goes quicker than recombination. And try this out. Try to buy a fancy whiskey from Scotland will probably do it. 12, 15, 20 years old. Try it and see if there's flavor at the front. There probably isn't because it over-oxidized. First second that you taste it, you swallow, nothing happens in the front of your mouth. A good indication of over-oxidation. If you leave whiskey in a barrel for 15 years, however many heads you add, it will not create a fruity flavors because they're gone after about 5, 6, 7 years. Now things get interesting, right? Because if you look at bourbon, it's made on American white oak, and if you look at what the Scots do, they finish their products in sherry casks, in wine casks. So first maybe bourbon barrels, second hand, and then the last 2–3 years, port barrels, sherry barrels. Weirdly enough, but not so weird if you understand what goes on over here, barrels that actually introduce fruity flavors, sherry and port. Why do they do that? Simply because after 15 or 20 years, this whole first dimension has gone. But if you finish your product on a sherry or a port barrel for 2 years, you reintroduce porty, sherry-like fruity flavors to bring back up that front end. In other words, you don't need to do that because you don't need to age your whiskey and rum for 15 or 20 years. I can guarantee you that if it's well cut and well made in a controlled fermentation and controlled distillation environment, after 3–4 years you'll reach maximum development of flavor. So not yet oxidation or full oxidation and almost perfect recombination. No need to buy sherry casks or those very expensive port casks. Just buy a cask and have it do its magic. Oxidation, recombination, and finally the wood flavors itself. Now this is a very complicated topic, so I decided to make it slightly less complicated. If you look at the wood, there's basically 2 flavors that you get out of it. There's many more, so don't get angry with me, there's many more, but basically there's 2. There's the vanillins, a sweet flavor, and there's tannins. A strong, sometimes very harsh flavor, like make tea and leave the bag in for too long and, you know, it sort of bites your teeth almost. The vanillins are sweet, fruity. They resemble the Hadscott. The tannins are earthy and rooty, complex. They do a lot of good for the back end flavor of your drink. So now you can play around with vanillins and with tannins. What kind of barrel do I need? Wow, there's amazing sherry barrels that I can buy. Why do you need them? Maybe because you over-aged your product? But if you don't, you really don't need that. The fruits and the fruity flavors will be there because of your fermentation protocols. and because of your distillation protocols. So how do we select woods for vanillin flavors or tannin flavors? That's actually quite easy. If you look at a tree, you cut it, what you see is year rings or growth rings, right? The older the tree, the more there are. What's most important is how far are those year rings apart? Are we looking at a species of oak from which the barrel is made that is fast growing, or are we looking at a species of oak that is slowly growing? If it's slowly growing, there's going to be a lot of year rings and not a whole lot of whitewood in between. If it's a fast growing oak species that your barrel is made from, it grows tremendously fast, there are few year rings and there's a lot of whitewood in the middle. The whitewood contains the vanillins. It's the year rings themselves, the hard superstructures that contain the tannins. So if you want more vanillin in your flavor, let's say you want to make a bourbon which is relatively sweet, fruity, front of mouth kind of drink, maybe you want to have vanillins. And guess what? If you buy barrels that are made out of American white oak is a fast-growing species. For its year rings, it's got a lot of white wood in between. That means that relatively to other species of oak, the American white oak gives you a lot of vanillins, which is probably why it's used in the bourbon industry to create a bourbon which is a relatively fruity and sweet kind of whiskey. If you like those flavors, go for American whitewood. If you want to go for a more complex style, if you want more tannins, if you want to up the third dimension, a more rooty, earthy experience, not like a bourbon that stays in your mouth for 5-6 seconds, but like a more traditional whiskey that stays in your mouth for maybe 20 or 25 seconds with a real backhand. Maybe focus on the tannins. So what species do you need? Not American white oak, because that's vanillin rich. What you basically need is a French oak vessel. For instance, from Limousin or one of the other regions in France, a wine cask, because the species of oak in France is relatively slow growing. So there's a lot of year rings, so there's a lot of tannins. There's not a lot of whitewood in between, so there's not a lot of vanillins. So in general, French wood, high in tannins, very good for the third dimension. In general, American white oak barrels have a lot of white wood, a lot of vanillins, creates a sweeter, more fruity kind of whiskey that we now happen to call bourbon. So you can't change it like that. You can say, actually what I want is I want this product to mature in a French oak because I like that third dimension, or I've got some barrels that are made from American white oak, and that's perfectly fine because it will be a less complex whiskey with more sweet and fruity notes at the beginning. That's how I want you to look at management. You're not buying the best barrels or this and that, such and so. You're basically buying the barrel that helps express the flavors that you need to express or want to express in your whiskey. Or to polish up mistakes that you made, like over-aging, oxidation, and now all of a sudden, you're not able anymore to get those flavors back unless you use a very fruity barrel. Could be American white oak, but then new. Or sherry or port barrels, because there's sherry or port in those barrels still. There's one other little trick that I want to talk to you about, how you can influence the flavors while you're aging in a barrel. And it has to do with the solvency of vanillins versus the solvency of tannins. Tannins dissolve in alcohol. Vanillins dissolve in water. Now if we barrel age, let's say at 65%, which is relatively high, means that there's a lot of alcohol in that new make spirit. That means that a lot of the tannins get extracted. Relatively less vanillins get extracted because there's only 35% water. So you can play around yourself. Given a certain barrel, you can say like, what happens if I go to 55%? I dilute my new make. I won't put it in the barrel at 65%, I'll put it at 55%. What you now did is you basically upped the amount of water relative and lowered the amount of alcohol. Alcohol dissolves tannins, water dissolves vanillins. Because you just upped the water content, you will create a sweeter, more vanillin result. Okay, so we discussed barrel aging and how different woods, different types of oak can help you create certain flavors or at least harvest certain flavors, and how the alcohol percentage is very important. And how the barrel isn't just about wood flavor extraction, but it's also a vessel where oxidation takes place and where recombination takes place. Now that's all very interesting, right? I hope you learned a lot, but what I want to do to finalize this video is actually give you 7 rules, 7 considerations to actually talk to your barrel manufacturer or to select your barrel manufacturer and use the list, talk to him about it, get his feedback and make sure he signs off on it. Because I want you to be able to buy the best barrels. And the way to do that is to go through these points, through these 7 questions as follows. First thing I want you to discuss with the guy that's going to sell you barrels is how do you go with the wood? Do you cleave it or do you saw right through it? And basically, if you saw right through it, you create a lot of open end, a lot of fibers get exposed. You get a lot of tannin extraction, unwanted, uncontrollable tannin extraction. You want to work together with a cooper that cleaves the wood. Hits it, goes with the wood. Because now he doesn't damage the wood so much and you get better flavors, better barrels, better whiskey and rum and brandy. Second thing you need to discuss is how did you dry the wood? How did you dry the staves before you turn it into a barrel that I'm probably going to buy from you? Did you just put it outside? And for how long? Staves from which barrels are made are dried to make sure that a lot of the green stuff, a lot of the very tanniny stuff leaches out through sun and through rain. But because it's cheaper to actually put it outside and rain it artificially, a lot of coopers actually do artificial raining. You get less well flavors because basically they're now able to put your staves into a barrel after maybe 12 or 16 months. When you do it traditionally, the wood can be outside for 2, 3, 4, or even 5 years. And the longer the wood stays outside, the better, the more amazing the wood flavors that come over into your whiskey. So you maybe want to make a well-informed decision. Am I going to go for this cheaper barrel that is rained upon, so has less intense flavors? Or do I go for certain barrels that have been naturally rained on and naturally dried out in the open air and that are of much better quality? And ask him and let him tell you how he does it and why he does it, and maybe he's got different varieties for you to choose from. Probably at different price levels, but it's your decision now to go for one or the other and you'll be better informed. Again, let him sign off on it. Make sure you send him an email, a letter where you say this is what we discussed and this is how you make barrels, and I'm very happy to do business with you under those conditions. How young is the oak that you actually use to make the staves from that you will make my barrel from? In general, a young oak, and that's an oak tree that is below 75 years, younger than 75 years of age, will have less nice flavors than an oak tree that is over 75. The ideal age is 100 to 150 years for an oak. But of course those oaks are very, very expensive. So very often you see that coopers want or need to actually go to the younger trees or do combination. An old stave and a young stave, an old stave and a young stave. It's not really an issue as long as you know it, as long as you get where you pay for. I personally like the oldest staves and the oldest trees, but I understand it comes at a cost price. So maybe for certain products you actually want to do a compromise, but maybe for some others you do not want to compromise. The fourth point I want you to consider and I want you to discuss with your cooper is this oak a lowland tree or a highland tree? And this is incredibly important because lowland oaks, talking Dutch here almost, lowland oaks grow very fast relative to Highland oaks. Highland oaks need to work, need to drill their roots into hard stone. They don't have an easy life, and that makes them, weirdly enough, very characterful. So an oak that comes from a highland region, in general, creates better flavors, or allows for better flavor extraction in the barrel, than a lowland oak. This also has to do with the fact that the water in highlands is very calcium-rich, mineral-rich, flows, it's very oxygenated, where lowland oaks basically, well, they have to drink flat water, not mineral-rich water, not very tasty water. And guess what? That flavor, that taste, or the absence thereof, actually translates into the wood and into your barrel and into your rum, brandy, or whiskey. Imagine that an oak, let's say 75 years old, 100, 150, drinks around 350 to 400 liters of water per day. I hope that makes very clear that the kind of water it drinks is essential to the flavors you're going to get over in your whiskey. So discuss it. Highland, lowland. There's going to be a price difference, or at least there should be. Water, I think we discussed that as well. The shape of the barrel, now that's an important one. There are basically, well, there are many shapes, but there are basically two shapes of barrels. And I'm going to draw them in an exaggerated way. A very long barrel, cigar-like shape, or a relative short barrel that is higher. What I want you to know is that the staves that give the flavor are on the horizontal. And in this shorter barrel, there's more end wood or top wood. That doesn't give off flavor. That is not the right wood. We're looking for the staves. So a cigar-like elongated barrel has relatively more stave surface area and less top end wood. A shorter barrel that is higher to compensate in order to make it, let's say, the same value or volume, or what is it, 50, 55 gallons, will have less of the staves and more of the top end wood. So basically you get less wood flavor for your buck. So consider this. What do I want? Best product looks like this. This may be a compromise. The final point, number 7. God is in the details. If you look at a barrel and it's not well made, doesn't look nice, it's not taken care of, and then the cooper tells you, yeah, but it's about the inside. No, it isn't. You don't see the inside. It's very difficult to look inside a barrel. If it looks bad on the outside, if it isn't finished with love and attention to detail, pretty much assure you that the inside is treated the same harsh way. If you find a barrel that is beautifully crafted, where you can actually see that the cooper loves what he's doing and proud of how it looks, even though the outside doesn't really make flavor for you, it is a good indication that you're talking to somebody who delivers quality. And that's what you need to go for.